we're going to start by discussing a little bit the two different billing modes, one which we just announced fairly recently. So that will kind of set the stage of, there's two ways that you can do billing that are pretty different for different use cases. We'll go over that. And then we'll kind of flip on the side of, okay, now that I've decided, what mode kind of makes sense for me, how do I calculate? How do I estimate it? How do I think about billing in general with LimaCharlie? So the two billing mode. So we've got two. One of them is a subscription mode, which is the old mode. So the classic one. It's what will look most familiar to you. It's pretty straightforward. And then we have the usage mode. So let's start with the subscription mode. Most people will want that mode. I'll just start with kind of that line. It's simplest because it is based around the number of endpoints that you have during concurrently connected. There's some other usage-based aspects to it, which we'll go over. But in general, really the bulk of the billing will be based on the quota. And I'll get to that a little bit more. The idea is that this is kind of the all-you-can-eat in LimaCharlie. So that allows you to say, you know what, I have an endpoint, and then you're kind of free to make the use that you want out of that endpoint, the type of telemetry you send back and forth, all that stuff, without having to really think about it. So it makes most sense if you're either new to LimaCharlie, or you have kind of long-term recurring, you're doing like monthly or yearly with your own customers, or internally in your own enterprise. So that's why it makes most sense. I mentioned the quota. So this is kind of the one metric that's used to do this. And it's we call it the quota. It's something that you set yourself in the billing section of the organization, which we'll get to a little later. The idea is that this is the number of endpoints that you want that tenant to be able to support. So for example, if you're an MSSP and you have 100 endpoints, right? Your customer tells you that they have 100 endpoints, you can set that to 100. If you're an enterprise and roughly the number of endpoints that you have, you can set it to that. But it is not a license per endpoint. The reason I make that kind of critical differentiation is if you have cloud workloads or you're re-imaging boxes all the time, that will work great with LimaCharlie, because this quota isn't one individual unique box that we've seen, but really it's concurrently connected. So if you have 100 endpoints, but only 50 of them are online at a time because they're two different spots on the globe, then you could have you set your quota to 50 and you're probably going to be okay. If you're not, you're going to get, there's a specific event that gets generated and an error as well that you'll see. The extra endpoints will be turned away, and that allows you to either increase the quota or reduce it. We have APIs for that. All that is done. Sometimes it's asked a little bit why we do it that way versus the number of unique boxes. As I mentioned, cloud workloads is really good for that. And having the quota, something you control, means that you are never going to get surprise bills, right? You're always in control how much you get billed. In the past, through different platform, different services, in security, what we've seen is sometimes, let's say, somebody uploading an installer of LimaCharlie or some other EDR to something like VirusTotal, then all the antivirus vendors get access to that. And so, we've seen people kind of freak out a little bit because they saw, 20 machines pop in from somewhere in China, which they were not expecting. And so that you don't want to be, paying for that. So that way the quota is really going to ensure that you can predict exactly what's going on. The usage mode is the newcomer here. So the usage mode is quite different, and it's really closer when you think about it to other cloud providers like AWS or Google Cloud or Azure, in that You are not built on this, this concept of I have one sensor and it's kind of connected, but you're really just built on very specific metrics. Those metrics there's three at the moment. So is the number of seconds that a sensor is connected to LimaCharlie. So that's the closest thing that is going to be, sort of similar to paying, for a subscription, except that in this case, when the sensor goes offline, you're not paying anything, and it's 2 cents per endpoint per month. So it's averaged over a month. So effectively, it's pretty much nothing. The two other metrics are the number of events analyzed. So that's what we get in, and you can run through the DNR rules and all of that. And the number of events retained. So if you have insight retention, again, you're not paying per endpoint, you're going to pay per event specifically. So why would you want to do that, right? What's the advantage? Where's the trade-off? And it's really important here. So the general statement is that the usage mode is great for partial users. When I say partial, it's not that, when I say partial, I'm really thinking about people that don't want all you can eat, right? They want to use either a very specific subset of the functionality, or they want to use a specific subset of the time, right? So they want to deploy an agent, an endpoint, but they don't necessarily want to have it, up to 11 all the time. They want to be able to maybe reduce it most of the time, the events coming through. And I'll show you how you can control all of that. And by doing that, that's where the partial comes in, either partial in terms of feature or partial in terms of, time around those features. So it means that the two big use cases are incident response to do pre-deployments. So that's the ability to take a sensor. Let's say if you're an IR firm, right? You can then go and deploy that agent on a potential customer of yours. Maybe you have like retainers or whatever it is. You can do the pre-deployment. By doing that, you are already set up, right? The sensors connect to the cloud. You can see the sensors, like the basic kind of core of LimaCharlie is there. You can see things. But specifically, if you turn down that usage to 0 or to 1, then you can pay effectively next to nothing for those until God forbid something happens to that customer. They call you. You can right away just turn it up to 11, go do the incident response, and you don't have to go and wait for their sysadmin. You don't have to go and wait to send people. To get anything, set up for that IR. You're already there. You're just seconds away from just full response. So I think that's a pretty good value proposition if you do a lot of IR. Because then if you're pre-deployed, who's that customer going to call first? It's probably going to be you. The second big use case is product. It's really more than a single use case, but the idea is LimaCharlie is not the EDR of LimaCharlie, I should say, or XDR, or whatever you want to call it, is not really a traditional, EDR, right? Where if you buy the EDR from some other vendors, if you've spoken to me in the past, I always refer to it as the widget, right? They'll give you the widget with the 3 different ways you can interact with it, and be happy for this. In our case, really, we give you the keys. So that means you can completely customize the types of events that come in, what you do using the agent, right? We talk a lot about EDR, but there's also some kind of RMM type of situations and scenarios you could do. So maybe you have a product, you're a startup, and you say, what, we want to do UEBA, and to do this, we need to have visibility on the endpoint. Or maybe you're doing, like some ML models based on DNS and process information. You need access to the endpoint. You kind of have a couple of choices, right? You're a startup, either you're going to go and you're going to raise a whole lot of money and spend 2 years, building your own agent to try to be on all those platforms. And, I can tell you building an agent is not an easy thing. It seems easy, but there's a lot of details. So you could do that. That's one thing. The other thing you could do is, you could try to support all the existing EDRs out there, which is fair. But then what you're really saying is, I'm going to shift the time and effort I put on building my own agent into building glue code for all of these other agents. And the sad reality is that you're going to end up with the lowest common denominator, where if you can't get a specific type of data across a lot of those agents or EDRs, then you're probably not going to want to really leverage it in your solution. Which is, if you're building a product, you're building a company, you have this great idea, that's not the right way to start doing things. So LimaCharlie usage mode really brings in that other option, which is we have the EDR, XDR with the widest compatibility out there. You can deploy it for effectively nothing, and you can pay only for the events that you need. So let's say you're doing that UEBA, or you're doing that DNS and process attribution. Then you can say, in my deployments, right, infrastructure as code, we're very infracentric. You can say, I only want, these specific events, and that's all I need for my product right now. Maybe in the future I'll need more, and that's great. It's all there. I can access it, and I'm only going to pay for it. So you're not, having to kind of bring in the whole cost of a whole EDR into the cost structure of your product. You really just need the little bits that you want to use. So that that opens up a ton of different avenues, and I'm sure there's also a lot of different use cases around this. Right, we specifically made this a billing mode that is kind of agnostic of what you want to do with it. Again, like LimaCharlie, right, the Lego blocks of security. We really tried to make things very versatile. If you have thoughts, ideas, things you want to build using this, get in touch with us. We're always happy to hear about that.